so you have access to it too on Facebook. It'll be on Facebook Live, so it'll record there as well as YouTube. So we'll go ahead and get it going. Okay. So we are going live on Facebook in a few seconds here. Okay. So again, we give it a few minutes after the hour to let everybody trickle in. But today we have Sonia Garcia. And now we are live on Facebook. So again, we give it a few minutes to let everybody trickle in. We are live on Facebook. We have Sonia Garcia with us on the topic of breaking free from parental wounds to create healthy relationships. So Sonia will be sharing with us. We won't get into the full introduction yet, but just to whet our appetites, she'll be sharing with us how her techniques of hypnosis and NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, can help transform your lives to create positive change and help you live your most empowered versions of yourselves. So welcome, Richard. Oh, Milo. Welcome, Milo. Glad to have you on the call. So today, again, we have Sonia Garcia. How's everybody doing? Does anybody have any comments, any reflections, anything that you need help and support as we get our call underway? Well, this space, a little bit about Healing Conversations. This space was built on unconditional love and acceptance, and really the release of self-judgment and critical self-talk, and just full acceptance of our expression. And so what we do each week is we have different guest speakers talk about different topics that are about their healing journey, their perspectives, that help us get perspectives. What I find and what I found in myself was that I grew up with a very narrow perspective, and I feel like a lot of us have perspective that is limiting, and so a lot of times we really don't see the bigger picture. And so what we're trying to do here is create awareness so that people, so we have a little echo. It might be me. So what we're trying to do here is create some awareness so that people can get different perspectives, because the more perspectives we have, we're able to get out of our own perspective and see that, wait, there's a different way to be, which creates a different experience of life. So today we have Sonia Garcia, and let's just get the introduction underway. We have some people trickling in, and I'm sure we'll have some more. She's talking to us on the subject of breaking free from parental wounds to create healthy relationships. Now, Sonia is a powerful, committed, trusting leader and beautiful, loving, and courageous woman. So she is known as the Change Queen. She's mastered the art of change through self-awareness and reprogramming the subconscious mind. She specializes in helping others make permanent changes in areas that have not been working and that they feel stuck or blocked. So she's a certified hypnotist and NLP practitioner, specializing in the education and coaching of those ready to make transformative changes in their lives. She has over 2 decades of transformational teaching and guiding people into supporting that transformation. So her core beliefs, which are very important, is freedom to design your life, not by default, but by design. Truth in being you, your authentic expression, and that love is first of all, accepting yourself as you are. It's a little bit about what is hypnosis, right? So a hypnotist is a person trained to guide others in a state of deep relaxation and focused attention called hypnosis, where they can make positive changes to their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. NLP. I was trained with NLP as a real estate broker to really be more of an effective communicator. But NLP at its core is neuro-linguistic programming. It's a method that helps people understand and change their thoughts and behaviors to improve their lives. It uses techniques to reframe negative thoughts, enhance communication, and achieve personal goals. So without further ado, Sonia, welcome. Welcome, everybody.
It is a pleasure to be here with you guys today, and my intention and commitment is to be of service, and I hope that my experience and my knowledge will shed some light for you and motivate you, inspire you, or at least answer some questions for you. So first of all, I want to ask, who here has amazing, committed, powerful relationships that they fulfill them and they utterly enjoy? Raise your hand if you have at least one of those, virtually, if you want to do reactions or who. Yeah, great. Good. So we know what it feels like, some of us, right, to have those relationships that feed us, that really bring fulfillment and joy to our lives. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how do we create those, how do we maintain those, how do we consistently live into those beautiful relationships that are possible for us, right? So just imagine that you have those relationships in multiple areas of your life, in your career, in your family, with your personal relationships, that you're able to generate and attract and maintain these relationships. I'm going to share how and how to best create those and attract those and maintain those. So now we're all in different stages. We all have different types of relationships. The things I'm going to talk about are general. Feel free to, some of it will apply, some of it won't. And I said, if you look at the more macro level or the more micro level, whichever is going to serve you is best. And like Noe said, my name is Sonia Garcia, and I am, here to serve and to talk about how to heal parental wounds, right? I found that for me in my personal relationships, that has been the biggest obstacle. And I believe, like Noe said, that we have that freedom. We can control and create our lives. And that you really get to, in order to do that, we have to be authentic, not only with ourselves, but with other people, really be courageous in who we are and live into that. And that love isn't only with other people, like love is with ourselves. Love is accepting ourselves, and love is accepting other people, but first ourselves. To the level that we can accept ourselves is the level that we can accept other people. So Noe, this is a great platform. I'm so happy that you invited me and we connected, just almost synchronicity, like on Instagram. And it seems like a wonderful community. I've been able to jump in and see the replays with several of this. And I'm really just grateful to be a part of this movement that you're doing. You're really inspiring in that your commitment to really share, create community. And everybody here to take this time, like Noe says, taking some time out of your day to really contribute and grow and listen. So to me, that means that you're already an awesome person and that you're continuing to be in community with like-minded people. So let me get into it. I'm just going to take a few minutes. I know Noe said 20, 30, 40 minutes, and I'll try to make this interactive. But before I do, let me introduce a little bit about myself and my background. Now in this present moment today, I have a really awesome relationship, romantic relationship that is more of a friendship. It's more of a growth relationship, I'll say. And it hasn't always been this way, right? And I'll say that, all the stories you can say, I say that I'm a student of life, because life has definitely thrown me a lot of lessons. I happen to be a Sagittarius, and we're adventurers, and we go out there and we just, I jump in head first at things. So I have a lot of stories and I'm going to share some stories because I believe that we learn better in stories. So, and I hope, I part of what I've learned, and part of actually one of my parental wounds was not wanting to hear stories. So it was actually, speaking of healing parental wounds, it's in becoming more of a public speaker, I've become comfortable in telling stories. So I ask your grace as I share a few stories. So the first story I want to talk about was these are all me, right? But it's a college graduate, right? And in college, I became pregnant in the middle of college towards the end. And I grew up in a Catholic family, and it was very rigid, right? It was very much expectations of get a college degree, get a good career, get married, and then you're successful. I don't know how many of you guys have had that kind of messaging when you grew up, but in my generation, I think it was pretty common. And So when I became pregnant and in my junior year of college, it was pretty devastating. It was devastating to my identity. It was devastating to my ego. More than anything, I really felt like I was going to be disowned. And that wasn't the case. But and in this, I definitely felt like I wasn't worthy of love, talking about in relationship. I thought, who would want to be with a single mom? At this point, I was like 19, 20 years old, and I was already with these beliefs of like, I'm broken, I'm unlovable, I'm a big commitment for somebody to take on. And in that state, I attracted a relationship where I was already, raising a child with a mortgage and trying to make ends meet. And I took on somebody in a relationship that didn't really have much to offer. And so it's almost somebody else to take care of. And I bought this person a car, and I supported them finishing their school and those type of things, right? And so a small child at home, the stress of starting a career, and then this relationship that was very tumultuous. And I could see myself with cycles of I can see that my inner soul, I feel like my inner calling would say, like, this isn't what life you want to create. But I think my inner wounds of a child that says, like, I'm unlovable, I'm unworthy, I messed up, really created the breeding ground for that relationship. So what I see now, after doing a lot of work on myself, is this, how the self-love was not there, and how important self-love is. And I'll take this back to the parental wounds and that what's modeled for us as children sometimes, right? I grew up in an alcoholic household. My mother had like a night job, so she would sleep during the day and she would be gone a lot of the times in the military. She was in the reserve, so she'd be gone some of the time. And so there wasn't the consistent messaging or even the consistency. So this tumultuous pattern that I experienced in this relationship wasn't new. This, feeling like I was broken and I needed to look for or provide something to somebody for them to love me, was something that I had picked up. So I know it's a little personal, and I'm not going to ask anybody to identify, but if you've known somebody in these type of patterns, sometimes we tend to not know our self-worth and not know our self-love, or not know self-love. And I'm just going to share a little quick tidbit about this, because it really probably took me until like my 30s to really get the self-love concept. And, and I'm very analytical. In another life, in a side career, I'm a math teacher. I teach high school math. And so I was just like, what is self-love? Everybody talks about self-love, but how do you do self-love, right? And one question that really supported me, and at this time, like I said, I had my son, is like, how do I love my son? I'm attentive, I feed him, I care about his happiness. Sometimes as parents, like your child could do no wrong. And I started to think, how can I apply that to myself, right? How can I then start telling myself, like, what if I'm not doing anything wrong? What if I'm whole and complete and perfect, like I saw my child? What if I took time to myself and took care of myself like I take care of my child? And that just kind of loops back to this inner child work and how powerful it is. And to really see, I think Noe was talking to me a little bit earlier about how we all have this inner child, and the importance of sometimes, giving ourselves maybe what our parental people couldn't give us, right? And it's not always a mother or father. Sometimes we have guardians in different situations. I acknowledge that. And, and I also want to add at this point that, even I've worked with so many people, and even if they have a quote unquote white picket fence, mother, father, siblings, good education, in hypnosis, I've come across people that would be like, well, if I had that type of childhood, then my life would be perfect. It doesn't work that way. How many of you guys know friends or people that you would think, well, oh, they would have it all together, right? And what it comes down to is a matter of perspective, right? And with hypnosis, what I do is I regress people back to those childhood memories, And that we were 0 to 7 years old. We didn't have any context for the things that were happening. And so our mind wants to make meaning and wants to make sense and protect ourselves. So we come up with these beliefs, right? These beliefs that at the time helped us survive. But yet now when I'm 43 years old, those don't necessarily work anymore. So that's the crust of it. The way it kind of works. Does anybody want to ask any questions or have any feedback now, or want to share any similar things that are coming up? No pressure at all. So I have another love story, if I will say. This one's actually really one of my favorite love stories. And I said I was a Sagittarius adventurer, right? So around when I was turning 30 years old, 29, I'd been a single mom for about 10 years. And both me and my son really, we would dream about having a nuclear family. I think at this point I had really done a lot of inner work, and I thought like, oh, that's something I would like to experience. And upon going to a family party, I'm Latina, so we have these big family parties. There was a family friend that I hadn't seen in years show up. And this family friend was somebody that in my childhood, we had a lot of chemistry and a lot of connection, but we weren't able to act on it because of the age difference. And now here I was older, here he was old enough to, and so sparks flew, we reconnected, and then we were inseparable for like a whole week. We were just running around, sneaking around, spending time together, really inseparable. He dropped me off at work, picked me up at work, and we were just delighted to finally be reconnected. And one night, it was the night before Valentine's Day, and he says, let's get married. And it had been a week. And so I was like, okay, it just felt so aligned and connected. And it had just been something that seemed like, again, synchronicity. It seemed like we had come together. And jumping in, going to Vegas overnight on Valentine's Day, my son, in tow. And then, it was beautiful. We had an amazing dream together that we created. And little did I know, because I hadn't seen this person in years and he had just come back into my life, that he had struggled all his life with addiction. And it was familiar and it was comfortable, again, because of the childhood wounds, because of my father's alcoholism. I wasn't quick to say like, this is not okay. Like, this isn't what I signed up for, or I can't expose my son and myself to this. I stayed in that marriage. It was 6 months before he became really, really ill. And it was a beautiful marriage that had, as you can imagine, in a marriage with an addict, there was ups and downs, but there was a lot of love and connection. There was a lot of healing, both for him and I know, again, talking about parental wounds and healing parental wounds to have awesome relationships, that I created that. I attracted this relationship, and I was able to heal so many of my childhood wounds around my addiction. Because, I could love and I can accept, and it was definitely very accepting. And it was at the very end, very much to even a spiritual level of connection and acceptance. And unfortunately, 13 months after we had first reconnected, again, he passed away from cirrhosis. And so that was really intense. It was a really intense part of my life, as you can imagine. But I bring that up and I share that to say that I already knew to stand to be 100% responsible for what I was creating. I was 100% responsible for attracting and generating this lesson into my life. I was responsible in who I was being in that relationship, committed and standing for his growth. He healed his relationship with his father, who he hadn't talked to for most of his life before he passed. And so I say all this to drive home the fact that like we can create and generate. We do, even if we do it subconsciously or consciously, we are creating our lives. And sometimes the lesson, someone's like, well, I didn't choose that lesson. Sometimes we don't want to really admit to, like, you know, that's not what I would have asked for. And yet I know that with this community, I can talk about these soul contracts, and I can talk about, you know, the lessons. But again, I choose to tell this story today because had it not been for my wounds as a child with my parents, then I wouldn't have generated this lesson. And I would love to say that that was healing, and I no longer attracted people who had the illness of addiction. And I still went on to kind of cyclically attract these type of lessons. But because of this awareness and because of the work of hypnosis, I myself have my own hypnotists and my own healers that I work with. Now, currently today, I'm in a completely relationship where he is healthy in that sense. And I'm able to be aware of the differences and to say no, not from a place of judgment, right? I think another lesson here to say, part of my childhood wounds, parental childhood wounds, was wanting to accept and feeling like I would be judgmental if I said, this is not for me, right? And I didn't even know that phrase as a kid, this is not for me. You know, this is something that, again, a lesson in relationships that we can say, we can say, I love you, I see you, you're a beautiful light, and I don't choose this for me to be in my life on a day-to-day basis. And I say that again from a knowing in my body, and I know because of this work, I'm able to stand in that and how powerful that is. So boundaries, and that kind of just leads me to what we call boundaries. And I think boundaries can be like that airy-fairy type of conceptual thing. But I invite us to think of, like, again, tied to the self-love, tied to the what I'm 100% responsible for what I'm creating, these lines and discernment of this works for me, this doesn't work for me, this feeds me, this drains me, and so forth. And how can we choose, how can we heal, and not coming from a place of we're broken, but coming from a place of the life I want to create. How can we heal those things that stop us from creating those relationships? So I'm gonna take another pause. Noe, did you want to add something? I see you.
No, I appreciate you sharing your stories. I think it's so powerful, and it helps us really look within ourselves, like, what are those past wounds that maybe we're not even acknowledging that are showing up in our current experience of our own relationships? And more importantly, it starts with the relationship that we have with ourselves, right? How do we view ourselves? What is that self-talk? And how does that show up? Because everything's a reflection, right? There's 8 billion people on this planet with 8 billion different worlds, and those worlds are created based on our perceptions of life. So at times it's really unquestioned. So I appreciate you bringing those examples because it really helps us look within. You know, how are those relationships coming up? And I think self-worth, right? I feel like we all have this fundamental misperception that I am not worthy, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve. And really, like, seeing, okay, wait, I do deserve. And these are really things that, for most of us, dysfunctional, broken households, I guess you could say, if we have to call it. I grew up in with a dad that was an alcoholic, for example, divorce, and he was abusive, and those things became filters, and that I wasn't even aware of, as an adult. So I think all of us can really reflect, like, who are our parents? How did that work out, and what were our reactions? Because they were really survival reactions, right? We're just kids. We didn't know any better, and so we adopted beliefs just to survive in those environments. And a lot of times we're these adults, as I mentioned earlier, we're these adults, but we're really with childlike perspectives. So thank you for helping us make us aware as far as that.
No. Well, I'll share a little bit about where my leading edge is in relationships, right? I've generated and now attracted somebody who's really safe emotionally, somebody who up until before there's a lot of now literature on like fight or flight, right? The anxious, insecure attachment, anxious, or there's another one. Can't remember the opposite of anxious, avoidance, right? Either you're really clingy or you're running away. And some of us aren't one or the other. Sometimes we do a lot of things. So this is a little bit of what I love, this relationship and personal growth, as I'm sure we share that with each other. But what I'm also experiencing now is a safe place to really emote and give space to my emotions that wasn't available to me as a child. and going through what's uncomfortable or not familiar, and being able to be courageous. It really does take courage and vulnerability. And, you know, feeling, you know, there's been some heightened points where it's like, I literally, my emotional body literally feels like it's gonna die. These heightened emotions that in the past I would suppress or distract, and still doing the inner work, still doing, you know, the things that as a child I had decided. One of them is, you know, I can't trust people, or people will let me down. The rug will get pulled out from under me if I'm too happy, right? This is something I experienced. If things are going so well, and I'm going to sabotage that, you know? So, but again, with this awareness and this consciousness, we're able to work through that and see it for what it is, and see that that's not us. That is not our light and our soul and our spirit that is generating that. That is not what is for us. That's not what is meant for us, really. And so, if anybody has any other comments or shares, and then we'll go into maybe a little bit more about hypnosis and how it works.
I do want to add to what you just said. I feel like every day, to kind of reframe what you're saying, we have a choice to live through fear, which is those avoiding, the clinging, that trauma response, right? Or we can live through love, that open heart, you know, where we're creating, like you said, we have the power to create our experience of life, or I think you worded different, the freedom to design our life. And so I think that awareness that you're talking about, and I'll let you get into those two techniques that are so empowering to raise our awareness so that we can move away from fear and into love, into our most inspired version of ourselves.
Hypnosis, actually, I came across hypnosis when I was in college before I got pregnant, the year before. And I was trying to be sneaky, and I took my speech class at the community college instead of my university because I thought it'd be easier. And happened to be that my speech therapist was also a hypnotist. And we come in the first day of class, and he says, he says the whole syllabus. He says what we got to do. There's no paper, there's nothing. He's just talking to us. And at the end, we start raising our hands. We're like, what did you say about this? And what is that? And he says, I'm not going to repeat myself. He said, I've said it once. It's recorded in your subconscious mind. It'll come. You guys know the answers. And always being a good student and always, you know, wanting to do right, I was in shock. I had never, ever had somebody tell me, I'm not going to answer your question. You already know the answer. And we went through the whole course. And at the very last day of school, of the summer school session, he had a volunteer student. This is a student who was older. Again, I was like maybe 18, 17. And this person seemed to be maybe in their mid-20s, early 30s. But he presented as a very childlike, you know, always wanting to ask questions, even though they had told us we're not going to be answered, you know. And so he was the one who was chosen as a volunteer. And he went on to do this hypnosis session. And he regressed him back to childhood memory where he had lost a book for school, and his mom was yelling at him and belittling him, and he really felt small. And in the regression, he was able to pause what was happening, to really think, well, you know, without the stress and the pressure of the mom yelling at him, he could find the book, and then and somehow, you know, heal that memory and that belief that he had made up. And then he went on to do like 2 or 3 more of these regressions with this one student. And at the end of it, the guy who before I thought was a little, you know, seemed really young, was a man, a strong, powerful, shoulders broad, talked differently. And I was just like mind blown. I was like, what did I just see? How did this person transform before my eyes in a matter of less than an hour with this hypnosis session? I remember going home that night and laying in, you know, crawling into bed with my parents who had gone to sleep for the night and just crying. Like everything was almost like what now I know it's not a nirvana, it's a Satori moment where everything makes sense. Like the whole universe is like, oh, wow, we do have the power. Like, I think what I made up in that moment, my belief was, there's nothing so wrong that can happen to a person that can't be healed. You know, that we have control to change these things that have happened to us. And it just changed my world. And that end of that summer, I went back to school and I forgot all about it. As we're young kids, you know, you're just like, it was such a powerful moment. And then I just went back to my life. And then in 2009, when there was a bunch of real estate courses and flipping houses and the real estate market was really high, I came across a hypnotist at a real estate conference. And he was kind of like the Tony Robbins NLP, really, grow your business and break through walls and this whole thing. And he had us eat fire and chop wood and walk on glass. And it was really, really rah, rah, rah. But I had remembered then that about the hypnosis that I had experienced years before, maybe 10 years before that. And I was like, wow. So then the opportunity came to become certified as a hypnotist. And that's when I said, okay, this is my chance to really dive into this and experience it fully, not just to eat fire, walk on glass. Everybody thinks of hypnosis, they think of stage hypnosis, but it can also be therapeutic. Hypnosis is really just a relaxed state. And we're in this state all the time. Sometimes when we're just driving down the road and we don't realize how we go there all the time. So we didn't remember how we even drove there. Sometimes we're watching TV and we're falling asleep while we're watching TV. That's a state of hypnosis. We watch the commercials and that's why they put them up there while we're half asleep. So, I came to learn hypnosis again. And like I said, I've had a career as a teacher also. So it was more something that I did for me personally. And I did for a few friends and family. I even hypnotized my son at the age of 10, which is really, really tough to see your child at the 10 already have childhood wounds, right? It was really interesting to do that. So that was in 2009. And then I would recertify every 2 or 3 years because again, it was something that I loved and it really interested me. When the pandemic hit and my son was 18 and moving away, and I said, what am I going to do with my time? I have all these coaching certifications and, NLP and hypnosis. And that's when I decided to dust them off the shelf and really support more of the public. And I've been really fortunate to be able to serve people in that way. And so the way hypnosis works, you get into this relaxed state. And a lot of people have this fear of somebody's going to control me if I'm hypnotized. And that is not the case. When you're half asleep on the couch, when you're driving in a zone, when you're in the zone driving, nobody can make you, at any time you can become more aware. So that is, and then, people say, well, what about the people quacking like a chicken in the stage? Aren't they controlling them? And I'll tell you guys the secret to that. The secret is they want to participate. They want the hypnotist to be successful. So when the hypnotist is picking the participants, they're picking the person who's the most wanting to do that. So then they play along. And even when they say, oh, you're going to forget what happened, and then they wake up and they really forgot, it's because they've chosen to go along with that, right? If somebody, if it was they really had to remember, they'd remember. So back to this, no, hypnosis isn't about control. It's about, for me as a hypnotist, I'm guiding somebody into, it could be like a guided meditation. And I'll tell you where it's different than a guided meditation. There is a sense of relaxing somebody. That's where you hear, we're going to count backwards from 3 to 1. When you hear the number 1, you'll XYZ. And so then once we get into that relaxed hypnotist, and then also, I'm jumping in, I'm giving you guys all the tips and tricks here. It's a practice, just like meditation is a practice, just like relaxation is a practice. The more you're hypnotized, the easier it is to get into these brain waves of relaxation. So, and the goal is then there is our critical mind, our conscious mind, this frontal lobe here, and then there's our subconscious mind. And there's like a gate per se, right? And so when we get into this relaxed state, it opens. So we're able to access the subconscious mind, and the subconscious mind is a video camera. Everything you've ever experienced in your lifetime is recorded in your subconscious mind. And later we'll talk, about in utero and previous lives possibly. But, and so we give the subconscious mind, the conscious mind, a directive of where we're going to go, what we're looking for. For example, I'm looking for a feeling I'm unlovable. And so your subconscious mind will present a memory of being unlovable. And my job is also to guide. And after doing this for, I would say now, dozens of times, I'm off the top of my head, I would say at least 100 sessions. The subconscious mind knows how to heal itself. We've talked about like the body knows how to heal itself. Our emotional body knows how to heal, our subconscious mind knows how to heal itself. So for me, it's more of leading a person to their own answers, and a lot of people are like, oh no, I have very traumatic things that may happen. I don't want to go back and look. And then to that, I say that our subconscious mind will not give us anything that we're not ready to see. And then that's where my job also comes in as a hypnotist, to have the techniques to create that safety. But honestly, and even the most traumatic events that I've heard said, I felt like the brain will not put it in such a way that you're actually living it again. Sometimes you see it happening, or you have a sense of it happening, but I think for the most part, you're safe, unless I would say somebody has severe mental health issues or things that should be done probably with a doctor. But for the most part, the subconscious mind is very supportive, and it's my job to be that higher, and to connect the person being hypnotized with their higher self. It's not even me saying this is what you need to do, or this is the way you need to see it. I am the intermediary for you to talk to yourself, to talk to your higher power, to create and heal these parental wounds or any wounds. So then they can be love and no longer fear. And so it always happens. It's a good practice to do 3 different regressions, because we want to establish the pattern for the subconscious mind. And it's like a string of pearls. Some people's like, oh, I didn't go back to the very first memory. It doesn't have to be the very first memory. All these memories happen and continue to happen. I talked about continuing to generate the same experience, because we start our conscious mind's trying to create evidence. So there's plenty of evidence of this belief. So my job is to take 3 of those pearls and pull them out. And then once you do, all the rest of the beads fall to the ground. So it's really, really powerful. This is why that man standing in front of me completely transformed in 1 hour. You're coming to the root of something. You're coming to the core of something. No, not so much worrying, and I'm going to take a little breath here to compare hypnotherapy with traditional therapy. Sometimes in talk therapy, we're talking about what happened, the situation, how can I think differently about it? What can I do differently about it? Which are helpful, but I think it's very surfacey. What if you can go down to the very root cause of something? And with doing that, you can change everything without much effort. And that's been my experience over and over and over again, where people what they love most about hypnosis is they don't have to think about making the change. The change is done, because it was all the things that they were trying to change were at that root level. And then after that, once we've repaired, then it's putting in, we've pretty much taken out something and fixed it in the car, but now we got to put gas in the car. I end with affirmations, but these aren't affirmations that I've created, right? You are creating your life. So at the beginning of the session, you tell me what those affirmations are. I do a full interview and I ask you, like, what does that look like? What does that feel like? And I use your own words in this process, and I'm feeding in this relaxation, and they're personal to you. Anybody can go on YouTube and find a hypnosis audio, which is great, but these are personal to you, and they're personal to the situation we're talking about. So after doing your personal regressions, we do your personal affirmations that I record, and then you listen to for 30 days to reinforce the pattern in your subconscious mind. And so that's pretty much hypnosis. So I'll stop for questions or comments if anybody's experienced it before, if you want to share your experience.
It'll be a great time for any reflections, any questions. I feel like we received so much valuable information, perspective. Anybody here want to ask the expert, now that we have her here, to take advantage of this time?
Sure. I have a question. So I really like what you said about how the subconscious mind is like a camera and it records everything, even though we might not be consciously aware or have access to those memories. And I've noticed that in my life, when I'm kind of either in the background or consciously have a particular topic in mind, or sometimes I'm kind of focused on certain types of symbols or numbers, I tend to notice things that match my intention or obsession, depending on what it is. And so I wonder, beyond actually going into a hypnosis session, are there ways that I kind of on my own can kind of guide my subconscious in that same fashion towards, things that I'm interested in, whether it's like, better relationships, remembering things that people tell me when it means something to them, and that sort of thing.
That's such a great question. Thank you. I have a few things to say about that. Definitely, you can create that intention, and that there's something called a reticular activating system. Have you heard of that? So this phenomenon that you're talking about is like, if I intend to see these numbers, or if I'm obsessed with a certain thing, then I see it everywhere. That is our subconscious mind. I mean, our conscious mind, we tell it what we think is important. So if we say this is important, then we see it all the time. And I love your question as far as it comes to relationships, even in remembering people's names, right? Because I'm sure everybody has heard this, is like, what you focus on expands, right? Whatever my intention, whatever I'm really saying to my conscious mind, like, this is very important, is gonna come in. So in relationship, and this happens, and I'm going to talk broad, and then I'll come back to your thing about memorizing people's names, is even in my relationship, sometimes I get into this pattern of like what he's doing wrong. And then all I see is what he's doing wrong. And I can go a day or two about like, man, this and this and this and this, right? And then there's other times where I'm just like, I'm so appreciative. I'm so grateful for this. And look at how awesome he is on this. And then I keep on seeing that. And then when I do that, I'm completely uplifted. So definitely we can use it as a tool, this reticular activating system, to see what we want to see and create what we want to create. I think people use mnemonics and different things like that for names. And I think I'll give you, unfortunately, I don't have like a trick or a thing, but I would just say, like, if you tell yourself that it is important, or if you can remember or share like a moment with that person and ask them a story about themselves, or more of a personal question than like, hey, what do you do, or where do you live? Because that's, easier for our brains to forget. But if you just say like, what is it that you're working on, or where do you see yourself in a year, or you know what I mean? Then their face and their name might stick with you. That's just one that comes off to the top of my head. It might be something maybe that you'll start and kind of play with to what. But if you definitely give your brain the intention that this is important to me, that I remember these names. I'll share one that's not related, but years ago when I was young, I went to a personal development retreat and they put us in a circle, and we had just been with each other like for an evening, maybe 2 or 3 hours. And we had to go to each and every person and say either their name that we remembered, or I don't care enough about you to know your name.
Oh.
And that was intense. And at this level where I'm at, I know that there's some people that it's okay if I don't know their names to me. And there's some people that it's very important to me that they know that they're important to me, even if I just met them. I vibe with them, or there's somebody I work with. I'm a teacher. So for me, for whatever reasons, it's easy for me to remember their names. It used to be when I was younger, I was just like, everybody sit in alphabetical and I'll look at alphabetical. But now it's like they all look different. They all talk about different things. They all, I kind of notice nuances. And sometimes for me, I'll like call them by their last name, or I'll give them a little nickname that they accept. But I know it's important for me to make that connection. I've told my brain it's important for me to remember their name. I hope that's helpful.
That's very helpful, especially that there's an actual system. I'll look up the reticular activating system later.
Yeah, like when you buy the car, and then you see that car everywhere when you don't remember this.
Exactly.
There's an actual name for it. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any?
Question.
Go ahead.
So when I really appreciate what you're sharing. And where my question lies is when you're talking about regression and going back to those periods. And I don't know that you're ever like 100% healed from childhood traumas, but I do think that, so it's like peeling an onion. So I guess my question is, if you've done a bunch of work and you've kind of looked at the story, looked at the situation, you've sat with the emotion, you've forgiven and released it, either yourself, other people, and you feel like maybe that story happened for you. Now you're in that place where like that created where I'm at now, like the person I am. And so you have gratitude and appreciation for that. Then if you do a regression, do you find that there are things still missed in there, or do you find that switches you back, like sets you back at all? Is there any value, I guess, in doing it again, if you're kind of in this place?
Great question. Thank you. So what comes up for me is this, like you said, there's always a different level, a different, almost like a prism, different angle. And I found I have a lot of friends who've done a lot of work for decades. And what they've shared with me that they experience is that sometimes it's that little 1 degree that gets them, when we're new to personal development and we're doing the healing, it's like one breakthrough is like leaps and bounds of change in our life, right?
Mhm.
And what I would suggest, and I'm not sure if this is answering your question, and please let me know if it's not, but I just say, if it keeps on coming up for somebody, if their life still continues to be like, my life is still giving me feedback and I'm not really excited about that feedback, then that's when I would choose that to continue to go into, right? For me right now, it's working with this, I can't trust people, right? And I think that even those are so broad. Like we talk about our core wounds as a human, as a soul, like this may have been for multiple lifetimes. This is what we came to this earth to learn, right? And so in that sense, I mean, I personally know, I know that this is work that I continue to do the rest of my life. Sometimes do I say, okay, I'm going to take a break from this, and then sometimes then life will come back and be like, okay, well, now it's time to pick this one back up again.
Right. So if you were looking at that like a mirror or a prism, would you then say, if I can't trust other people, it comes back to self-love, and I can't trust myself? It's
Yes.
kind of a
Totally. And then that's actually what's been coming up for me in my conversations, is a sense of like, you can only give what you have to give yourself. This mirroring and this reflection and shadows, right? And if I see it out there, then there's something either missing in me or in me, right? In my coaching with other people, it's a sense of like, what was it? Wanting to be giving. I'll give you a solid example. Not being somebody who wants to be considerate and giving in relationship. When they go on dates, they want to, really treat somebody like a goddess or king, but they don't give that to themselves. They don't know what that looks like. They don't know what that feels like. And even with their best intention of providing that, unless you give it to yourself, unless you know what that looks like, feels like, you've experienced that, it's impossible. And I would say impossible, but this is where you can model and you can mimic until you get it. But it makes it more challenging than when you actually have that self-love and you have that experience of it yourself.
really good. Thank you.
I do want to share, if nobody else has more questions, just about another technique that I'm certified in, and that's really powerful. Without having to go into the trauma, actually. It's called mental and emotional release. I studied under Dr. Matt James. And again, I'm a student of life and a student of living. And this therapy is what I think what some people might have heard of similar things called timeline therapy. And so you look at your life as a timeline, and it's releasing the emotions. For somebody possibly like me, who's very cerebral, and I'll just say I love hypnosis because to me it's very formulaic. Even though there's a lot of going in and doing the work on the emotional level, it's like if I do X, Y, and Z, then I can know. What I love about hypnosis is that you're aware of what the change was. I'm aware that that memory, I fixed it, I tinkered with it, I added love, and now I'm different. So a lot of healing, maybe I am a fan of all healing that gets results and feels good for people and aligned. But I'll say the difference is, like, let's say with Reiki or with other, somebody is doing it to me or holding space. And I would say that still nobody does anything to you. It might have to feel like that, but it's still them manipulating, just kind of working with you, and you're allowing you space to do the work for yourself. But for me, hypnosis, for somebody who likes intellectual change or mysteries and solving problems, for me, I think what was so empowering about hypnosis is that I knew at the end of a hypnosis session, I could say like X, Y, and Z was the reason for A, B, and C. And now that I've changed those, now I can see the difference. So for me, I love that part of it. Now, timeline therapy is very effective, but that doesn't happen in timeline therapy, but it's still very effective because you're going to these emotions of anger, sadness, guilt, shame, and releasing them. But it is helpful that Dr. Matt James did a lot of study on patients that have PTSD from war and stuff, veterans. He has a whole bunch of studies on veterans. And I just say that because to me, and from my experience and what I'm passionate about, are these therapies that go back to like the core of it, to get it from the root, to take it out at some deeper levels. And so this timeline, it'll take events that happen throughout your timeline without having to necessarily know all the events. And then it's using this concept of perspective. If I can get a higher self perspective, if I can, like, I love the way Connie said, if I can get to a place of gratitude or separating it from seeing it from a bigger vision, then I can release it. And so there's a book out on that. He wrote a book on that, mental and emotional release, if you'd like to look into that. And I'm a practitioner in that too.
Thank you. That's so interesting. As you're talking, I got introduced to a different method to basically what you're talking about. Look at the root of things. Is there any placeholders, any programs? Is it a mental, emotional, spiritual? What is it that is causing the malfunction, causing us to suffer? And so I appreciate the different perspectives you're sharing, because I got introduced to a different healing modality that basically does the same thing you're talking about. And so it just gives me a broader perspective of how really it's all connected, as far as the method of helping people really heal themselves and making them aware. So I'm so appreciative for that. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Of course.
So we have about 8 minutes. Does anybody else have any shares, any comments, any questions, anything that maybe you're going through that you feel like maybe Sonia can give you some nuggets, or maybe even guide you or help you, have a little bit of light of awareness, some breakthrough? This would be a great time to take advantage of that.
What would you say is like one of the biggest breakthroughs? I don't want to talk about other people's therapy, but like for yourself, like when you went through this, what was a pattern? I always use a term, it kind of sounds monetary, but it's not. It was a breakthrough for me, contributing versus being contributed to. Like I would pour everything in, but I never stopped to actually ask the other person to like make this a mutually beneficial relationship. It was always at a self-sacrifice level. But in your journey, what do you feel that this service, like what was the biggest release it gave you from in pattern wise?
I'll share personally, and then I'll share a wonderful success story that I have the
Great.
permission to share. For me, it's this one of, and I kind of shared briefly, but I'll share it to a little the deeper level when it comes to relationships. It's this being able to discern. And I think I really felt like I had to accept everybody's energy. If I was Jesus-like, if I was, I think from a young age, I was taught to like love the poor and want to fix the world. And and love everybody, and a lot of stories of like maybe a character who wasn't so lovable and loving them anyways. And so it has taken me a lot of years. I think it's something that I may, but I'm, and it definitely, I'd say, 75-80% better at just saying that it's okay to love from a spiritual level and not have to share my energy or give without it being reciprocated. So similar in that sense, but for me, it was that it doesn't make me a bad person. I thought I was a bad person. I prided myself in being non-judgmental. I didn't want people to judge me, so I didn't want to judge people, right? But when you're looking for a relationship, that's very hard. That put me in a lot of dangerous situations. That put me in a lot of questionable people, because in my head, it's like I was put with this person for a reason, or how to love them, and if I loved them, then they would change, or this and this, all those things that come from that root thing. And then one of my best stories, and this is a person who had done a lot of work, but it was like one of those 1% that really changed her life. She came to me, and she was in a marriage. They had one child, but they wanted more children, but they wouldn't commit to it because they were so on and off. They would have this cycle of a few years, and then 2 or 3 years of doubting the relationship. And so she came to me. She's like, I need to know. I'm at my wit's end. Do I stay, or are we doing this? Or are we not doing this? I've already done coaching. I've done all these different things, and so I could also say she was ready. I think part of all this is being at that moment where I'm ready to dive in and really do this work. And so we did the session, and what she came to in the session was a sense of she was keeping score in her relationship. She had it as her belief was, I'm doing X, Y, and Z, and they're not doing da 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 da. And so she was able to see that. She was able to coach, in that session herself, tell herself that that's not love. This person really loves her and has shown up for her for so long, but she wasn't able to see that. Kind of like we're talking about the reticular activating system. She had this belief, this construct that kept her from experiencing that love. And then they've gone on to have two small children now. And to her, she's so grateful. She was just like, that one session allowed me to have this thing that I really wanted in my life, and this family that she just enjoys it because it's something that she didn't have clarity on. And that one session really changed that for her.
That's amazing. That's awesome. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
I will say that there are certain things that are continual. That one session doesn't have such a rapid transformation. And I tend to really say I like to do 3 sessions 1 month apart, because you clear one thing, and then I have this saying that like your subconscious mind's like, oh, we have a tool now. Let me throw up all the junk. I don't know if you guys experience that. Yeah, right. So
That's true.
I try, I really suggest working in 3 sessions, 3 months for 3 months. But I say this because sometimes we're so committed to our story that we go back to it, even though we have a solution and even though we see a way out. I have some clients who it's such a strong ingrained thing. It serves them in different ways that they do change. I don't think I've had a client who said it hasn't helped me, or I've regressed back, and I think it's a more continual thing. And that usually happens with people that are newer to personal development. Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Thank you, Sonia. One of the words that you said a few times is stories. I just want to reflect on that. One of the techniques that I use that one of my mentors helped me appreciate was just to do self-inquiry. Like, who am I? What am I? And I find that what we are is a compilation of stories that create this character, this perception of who reflects back in the mirror, who sees life a particular way. And so what I learned to do is also ask a self-reflective question. It's like, what is wrong with right now if I don't think about it? But really being present with life, right? Then the mind goes quiet. Then we're just simply being. And so I find that a lot of the self-healing journey is just, we have these stories that we really cling to. They create this identity, these trauma stories, right? That are really skewing our perception of what real life really is. There's nobody trying to hurt us, but we're always on defense. We're always in protection mode, right? But when we release the stories, then we could just be open to the present moment and enjoying life without all the miscues of not being able to see what's really going on. So for me, that's been so transformational, but it's really hard to do, right? Like, and so there's so many healing techniques out there, and what you've expressed today is like, wow, eye-opening. So I so appreciate, you coming with us and sharing your light with us. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys for allowing me to share and contribute and share. That Noe is just like, you just come and share. I said, okay. Yeah, and I'll have to share. I'm gonna be a little bit vulnerable and share that it's been 1.5 years since I've done any speaking. And I had but I was able to retell this story on Saturday, and I think it was really helpful, but I didn't realize how I had allowed the trauma to really keep me. I'm like, I'm gonna go back to teaching, and I don't want to do any exposing and being vulnerable. And when Noe came to me, it reminded me that my story and my skills could serve people. And he said, this is really low stakes. All you got to do is come and just share. And I thank you. I'm grateful for the opportunity, very much so.
I appreciate that we ran into each other and we were able to connect, and I appreciate you being here. And I know this is going to be something that's going to be so transformational for people, whoever sees it, the recordings, whoever was here. Like, there's so many nuggets here, so much beautiful information that we could use to just have a better experience every day, right? That's what it's all about. Feeling better. How can we feel better? How can we do like maybe a little bit better, 1 degree better, that can help us have a better experience? And so I don't know, when I look at what this is all about, we're creating stories, and what kind of experience do we want to have? Do we want to continue to suffer with our stories, or do we want to be free from our stories and create more empowering stories, or just simply be? Like I marvel, like I look in my backyard, and one of the comments I've been telling people is like, wow, I've been like really marveling at these butterflies that I keep seeing, in my garden, or just looking at my garden. I'm like, is this the simple things of life sometimes that can make us smile? But sometimes we get so caught up in the mind, and the mind really skews the beauty that's all around us, right? It just makes things look, it just makes us suffer. So that's really the purpose of healing conversations, to release the suffering and help us really be in a state of appreciation for all the good things that we have in our lives, and empower us to create more better stories that make us feel better every day. So thank you for helping us to that end, Sonia. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sonia.
Just meeting all you guys, and hope to see you guys back. I'll be jumping in on some of these myself.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
They do. Appreciate it.
Love you guys. Till next time.
Love you, Noe. Thank you.
Love you, Connie.